SN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Many young people who are listening and who have questions about the economic system, about the monetary system, wondering what your future is in America, you need to listen to Elijah Johnson. He's been a speaker at both Liberty Mastermind symposiums, and he's been researching the monetary system, become a big supporter of Austrian economics over the years. He's 18 years old and come to the conclusion that the collapse of the system is all but inevitable. And if you've been watching the headlines recently, you see an acceleration, spinning out of control of the system. Elijah, welcome back.
Hey, Kerry, thanks for having me.
Hey, so look, you've been studying this for a while. You've spoken with a lot of people. You've done a lot of interviews, scores of interviews. And what's your conclusion about Austrian economics?
Well, basically, I mean, the U.S. government is completely, running off of Keynesian economics right now. They're not using Austrian economics right now. What they're doing, there's basically 2 main problems, is the government basically borrowing money from the future, going further and further into debt, and the Federal Reserve just going, running this printing press and just doing it so much. They're printing $55 billion per month. This is historically unprecedented. And so I guess with the first problem we're seeing right now, on average, since the early 80s, the U.S. debt has been doubling about every 7 years. And I mean, this can theoretically go on indefinitely, but only if other countries are willing to continue to lend to the U.S. The system will keep running. But according to the latest data from the U.S. Treasury, the Department of the Treasury, from November to December of 2013, China actually decreased their holdings of U.S. Treasuries by over $35 billion. And China is now, the latest data is from January 2013, they're holding about the same amount of treasuries as they were a year ago in March of 2013. January of 2014, so in January of 2014, China was holding about the same amount of treasuries as they were in March of 2013. Now, what I think is happening right now, to create artificial demand for U.S. debt, the Federal Reserve is purchasing $25 billion a month of treasuries, while also Obama is now announcing this MyRA program, which is basically a retirement program where Obama is saying, okay, people, give us your money for retirement and we'll invest it in government bonds. Now, where does this all end up? I mean, it's pretty obvious. I mean, if countries aren't going to be lending to the United States in the future, if they start dumping treasuries, well, I mean, it seems like that the dollar could just inflate. People just won't trust the dollar anymore.
Yeah, there's IRA program. And who's he put in charge of it? But John Corzine, the mastermind behind the implosion of MF Global. Sounds like a real recipe for success, doesn't it?
Right. And I mean, and the other problem right now is the Federal Reserve just printing so much money right now. They're printing $25 billion a month to buy treasuries, as I noted. And then also, I believe it's $30 billion a month, basically to bail out banks. They're borrowing mortgage-backed securities off of banks' balance sheets. Now, what this basically is doing, I mean, it's basically stealing from the American people. I mean, imagine if you're going to buy a car and you have a mortgage, okay, it's really great to buy that car and you really like it. And then, but until you have to pay on the mortgage each month. But the thing is, you're not even getting the car in this case. You're not getting the benefit of this. The banks are getting the car. They're getting the benefit of the Federal Reserve printing money, but you're having to pay the payment each month. The Federal Reserve is creating $35 billion a month to bail out the banks. And how are you paying for it? You're paying forth through inflation.
Yeah, but a lot of people look and say, oh, the prices aren't going up. There's no inflation, so the thing is working. Aren't they smart?
Right. I mean, but the thing with the inflation numbers is what I think it was in Mike Maloney's book, Guide to Investing in Gold and Silver. Basically, he explained that with the inflation numbers, basically the Bureau of Labor Statistics, from year to year, if they think one thing in their basket of things they look at for prices going up, if one of those things they think, oh, it kind of went up too much this year, they'll just, take it out of the basket. And John Williams over at Shadow Government Statistics, shadowstats.com, shows that, I haven't checked it recently, but it's, inflation, if you use how the Bureau of Labor Statistics used to calculate inflation, I think it was back maybe 30 years ago before they started this, rigging of the numbers, inflation right now is around 10%. Is
that right? 10%, you think?
I haven't checked it recently. You can go to shadowstats.com and you can see the real numbers, but it's around 10%, I believe.
Yeah. So that's a far cry from the 2% that they claim is the official government sanctioned number, isn't it?
Right. I mean, and you have to look at, okay, maybe you have to look at the Federal Reserve is creating all this money. Not everything increases at the same time. Not everything inflates, and you don't see inflation everywhere in the economy at the same time. One of the big places that you're seeing inflation is in the stock market right now. We saw the Dow back from, I believe it was 2011 or 2012 when it was at about 10,000, and then we see it now at around 16,000. So we're seeing this huge inflation of the stock market, and it's giving the impression to everyone that the economy is doing well, but it's just not. I mean, look at what the Federal Reserve is doing. I know they're saying they're tapering, printing all this money, but they're still printing $55 billion a month to prop up the economy. I mean, the economy has to be pretty bad for them to still need to print $55 billion a month each month just to prop up the economy.
Right. That's not the sign of a healthy economy that they need to be doing that, right?
Exactly. I mean, it gets back to the point of, they're trying, they're being a large demand for treasuries right now because other countries like China, it seems like, aren't buying as many.
Mm-hmm. So where's it all going to end here, Elijah? I mean, obviously, this Ponzi scheme can only go on so long, and now we see China going into all these bilateral agreements with other countries because I think the world's getting fed up with the U.S.'s profligacy, budget deficits, trade deficits, and the U.S. acts all it has to do is print up more currency units, pass them around the world, and it can buy whatever it wants. And then all these countries are stuck with dollars and nothing to do with them.
Exactly. I mean, what I think it'll eventually end up, I mean, I know I recently interviewed Daniel Amaduri from FutureMoneyTrends.com, and he made a really interesting point that the economy is inevitably going to collapse, but it doesn't mean it's going to happen. It doesn't mean it's imminent. So, but eventually, I think it's inevitable that with the government going into debt so much every single year, and the Federal Reserve printing so much money, when you have more of something, more dollars in existence, the value of it just keeps falling and falling. And as you mentioned, with these countries trying to trade without using the dollar, it seems like the value of the dollar is just going to continue to fall and fall and fall. And eventually, it seems like we're going to have basically a collapse in the value of the dollar. And I'm not a financial advisor, but throughout history, in times of crisis, in times of a currency crisis, the things that have protected people from that is gold and silver.
So gold and silver is your ultimate insurance policy, is what you're saying, huh?
Right. And it's not just insurance. I mean, it's insurance in the way that, it's one of the safest assets that you can hold. It has never gone to zero for the past 5,000 years. But also right now, I mean, so right now it's a great opportunity because of the crisis we're in. And it's not like it's not like, I'm cheering this crisis to, unfold so gold and silver prices will go up. But you just have to, as Mike Maloney of goldsilver.com has said, you just have to play the cards that you're dealt, and you just have to take advantage of the situation that you're in right now.
Yeah, and that's kind of a shame, but what can you do? You kind of have to play the cards you're dealt, as you said. And we'll talk more about this up next on the Financial Survival Network. We're speaking with Elijah Johnson.
FSN Radio.
When your accountant wants tax-free income, this is what he does. Accountants know the law. They also know that any American could legally get paid up to 3 times per month, 100% tax-free. That's 36 tax-free checks each year. It doesn't matter what you make already. This simple strategy could work for anyone. Go to www.irsrevenge2.com to learn how. That's irsrevenge2.com.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next.
Are you worried about protecting your wealth against a dollar collapse? Worried about gold confiscation? Owings Metals provides wearable wealth solutions that will keep your wealth safe from a declining dollar and from a government that's getting more desperate by the day. The Indians have understood this for thousands of years. Americans are just starting to catch on. When you wear an Owings Metals 24-karat piece of jewelry, you can safely cross borders and take your wealth with you. Best of all, it's insurable. And unlike a lot of Indian jewelry, it's very durable. It can easily be disassembled and sold off in pieces if you need cash. It's surprisingly affordable and definitely should have a place in your wealth diversification strategy. Precious metals are like so many other types of insurance. You only find out how important and essential they are after disaster strikes. Call Owings Metals now at 855-604-6343. 855-604-6343. Don't wait until it's too late. 855-604-6343 now.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
And we are back on the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz, speaking with Elijah Johnson. So, Elijah, obviously not many people of your age understand this. Have you ever tried to sit down and talk with people and try to really get them to understand what's happening?
Well, actually, it's funny that you mentioned that because last semester, currently I'm doing post-secondary enrollment option at a college, meaning that for the last year of my high school, I'm taking college courses. And last year I took a public speaking course. And for 2 of my speeches, I actually discussed about, what is inflation? How is it? How does price inflation happen? And how it's related to basically the Federal Reserve just continuing to print money, bailing out the banks, propping up the U.S. bonds market. And also in my second speech, I talked about how this will inevitably end in a crash and what people can do to prepare.
Mm-hmm. And what was the response that you got to these speeches? Because obviously, in a way, it's a good thing because it's just a public speaking course. So people aren't really getting their defenses up to a message that they don't necessarily want to hear, right? So that's good because they're really just critiquing the way that you're speaking rather than your message, right?
Right. And I actually talked with someone in my class after I did one of my speeches, and they actually, knew a little bit about this and, knew how much of a mess we are in right now. And it's great to see that people, in my generation, a lot of them, some of them are waking up to the reality of the current financial system and how it seems like it's inevitably going to end in a collapse.
Yeah. And then how many people were in this class where you gave this presentation?
I don't know. I think probably about 20.
20. And so out of 20 people, you got one person who kind of got it, huh?
Well, I mean, you have to, educate people one
mind at a time.
Yeah.
One mind at a time. But hey, that's not bad. That's 5%. And if you had the opportunity to keep addressing those 20 people at the end of the class, you might who knows, you might get 4 or 5 of them at least having an understanding. They don't necessarily have to agree, but you got the seed of a greater thought placed in their minds. And got a question, because I've met your parents, and I know they're extremely proud of the man that you're becoming. Before you got into this, did your parents have an inkling of what lays ahead for the United States?
Well, not too much, but I remember I believe we've discussed a little bit about this before. When I was about maybe in 4th grade, when I was homeschooled, I wanted to write a report on how money was created, and my dad helped me, with the research, and we couldn't figure it out. And we came to we both were wondering, wait a second, where does the value of money come from? I mean, my dad made the point was, if you took a $20 bill, put it in the furnace, burnt it, does value disappear? I mean, where does that value go? And I mean, we eventually found out that, wait a second, no, there is no value in paper money. It's just the perceived value that people see with it. It's basically what gives value money is that everyone else believes it has value. And that's just a really interesting thing. And that's what really led us to wake up to, how the Federal Reserve works and how our money is just created out of nothing. It's not backed by gold anymore. And, it unraveled this whole thing of, the corrupt financial system, and how it seems like the whole system is just not going to last.
Yeah, it's rigged, and it's a franchise that works great for the people that get to create the money, but not so great for the people who get the money and get the depreciating asset. There was just that interview on CBS with Michael Lewis, author of Liar's Poker. I've read every book that the guy wrote, because every book that he writes turns out to be an inflection point in the financial system. Going back to Liar's Poker, I don't know if you ever had the opportunity to read it. Short book. You should read it if you have the chance, Elijah. New one is called The Flash Boys, and it's all about flash trading. And sure enough, interview on 60 Minutes, he says the system's rigged. All of a sudden, the feds are launching a probe. And you and I've known probably a little longer than you, I've got a few years on you, know that the system is rigged. And if you're going to start investigating, let's go back to the inception of the Federal Reserve that gave these banks the privilege, the franchise, and the right to print money, because that's what credit expansion is all about, to create money out of thin air and then charge interest to the borrower of the money that you created out of thin air. There's something inherently wrong with that system, isn't there?
Right. I mean, and if you look at, if you read The Creature from Jekyll Island, and, look at by G. Edward Griffin, The Creature from Jekyll Island is a book I definitely recommend. And he explains that how the Federal Reserve was really created. It was created by a bunch of bankers on a private island. I mean, it sounds crazy. It sounds like a conspiracy theory, but you look at it and you look at, it's actually a true story, and you can actually verify it other places as well, that I think it was the Assistant Secretary of the Treasury and a bunch of bankers went in 1910 to a private island and basically discussed, how to run the monetary system in the future.
Yeah. And that was in I don't remember the date, but in the early 1900s. And then, sure enough, in 1913, we got the Federal Reserve Act being passed. Christmas time, right when the biggest adversaries were just happened to be leaving for Christmas break. And now, 100 years later, looks like this thing is going to go the way of the buggy whip. And yeah, we don't learn anything from history is what's quite obvious, that unbacked fiat currency really just can't work over time. It creates too much havoc when you have an unbacked currency, and too much opportunity for mischief. And yeah, we're in a bind now, and who knows how this thing is going to end up. What's your personal opinion for how much longer this thing goes on?
I mean, I really actually have no idea. I mean, it could end tomorrow. I mean, the dollar could start collapsing tomorrow. Or in my interview with Daniel Amaduri, he said it could last a lot longer if the government just, changed one of the rules, like saying the Social Security age, we're going to bump it up 10 years, something like that. That might be unpopular, but it would definitely prolong how long the system can run. I mean, and as you were mentioning about that fiat currencies can never last. I mean, that's one of the great fallacies in human history, that thinking that we can create value out of nothing. I mean, just by doing no work. People, for millennia have been wanting to turn lead into gold, but obviously that you can't do that. But let's say you could do that. If you could do that, then everybody could create however much gold they wanted, and it wouldn't be worth anything anymore. Anybody could have as much as they wanted. Basically, what the Federal Reserve has done is, and all these governments throughout history have done when they, create a paper monetary system, is basically they're turning lead into gold, and they're creating as much as they want, and they think that they can create this value out of just ink and paper, but they can't. It'll eventually collapse, and the value of that will fall to its intrinsic value, which is zero.
Yeah, that's really what it's about. And the alchemy that you're talking about, they've been trying to figure out how to create something from nothing for a lot of years. And, they thought they finally struck gold, paper gold, but that's not going to go much longer, is it?
No, there is it is true that with the gifts that we've been given, we can create value, but you need to put work into it. You need to be an entrepreneur. You need to, build a business and grow the economy in the right way, not just by creating paper.
Mm-hmm. That's really it. You got to bring value to the table. Hey, your website, where do we find you again, Elijah?
Yeah, people can go to financeandliberty.com.
financeandliberty.com. Link to the site from the show notes to this interview on financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Don't forget, sign up for the newsletter. You don't want to miss the next one. Last one we got unbelievable feedback on Operation Dirty Money from the Treasury. Elijah, we'll talk to you again real soon. Good luck with school, and we'll see what happens next.
Thank you so much, Kerry.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.